Welcome, everyone, to the 11th Annual Ridgewood Guild International Film Festival. My name's Jim Suazo. I'm a member of the committee, and I have the pleasure of moderating this panel with some industry experts. Let me introduce them to you. We have Glenn Allen here. He's a resident of Bergen County and the co-owner of the visual effects studio Brainstorm Digital. Since 1991, Glenn has worked on some of the most successful movie and television projects in entertainment history. Glenn is credited as producer, director, editor, or visual effects supervisor on over 100 feature films and television shows, spanning 30 years, earning 2 consecutive Emmy Awards as visual effects producer on Boardwalk Empire. After graduating Emerson College, Glenn worked in every department in the industry, eventually working his way onto Ron Howard's editing team, where he spent 10 years in Ron's cutting room. With Ron's encouragement, in 2003, Glenn founded the visual effects studio Brainstorm Digital, which led to many opportunities, such as producing the History Channel series, The Man Who Built America, and producing and editing 2 Neil Young concert movies for Jonathan Demme. While overseeing the visual effects work for Brainstorm Digital, Glenn develops and pitches various projects to networks while producing, directing, writing, and editing others. He executive produced a film in this year's festival, The Morning Breeze. Thank you, Glenn. Next to me on my right is David Krumholtz. He's an actor, writer, and producer. David grew up in Queens and now lives in Bergen County. He made his professional acting debut on Broadway 30 years ago. He has been fortunate to work consistently from that point forward. Career highlights include CBS's Numbers and HBO's The Deuce, as well as the films The Santa Claus, 10 Things I Hate About You, Ray, Hail Caesar, and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. He also has created, written, and starred in Gigi Does It for the Independent Film Channel, or IFC. Krumholtz can next be seen in The White House Plumbers on HBO and Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer for Universal Studios. That's one I'm really looking forward to see.
That makes one of us. I'm in it, but you know.
On the end, we have Todd Edelston, and Todd is a founder of Actors Technique New York, the leading TV, film, youth acting studio in New York City, and now opening in Ridgewood. As a private acting coach to New York City and LA's top agents, he's advanced the careers of young stars, such as Madeline Klein of Outer Banks and Cameron Ocasio from Sam and Cat, to mention just a few. His earlier acting credits include HBO's Oz, ABC's One Life to Live, NBC's Law and Order, SVU, CBS's Bull, and most currently, Brass Tactics, City on Fire. He is a co-producer of Broadway's Mr. Saturday Night with Billy Crystal, and is thrilled to be a part of this special event. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. And last but not least, we have Suzanne Ortis Curry, who's owned a PR firm since 1988. 10 years ago, through an entertainment client, she started her second career as an independent film, series, and podcast producer, specializing in marketing them. Her more than 20 projects have won awards at the top film festivals and have been nominated for Daytime Emmys and Indie Series Awards. Her projects have been seen on most streaming channels, HBO, Lifetime, Showtime, and in theaters. Suzanne is a founding member of Rebel Media, which is premiering Mr. Malcolm's List in July. Her workbook on marketing independent films will be out in 2022. Her newest project, The Libby Show, an online talk show for women of a certain age, is on YouTube and iWoman TV. An episode of The Libby Show is also part of this year's festival and played last night. So thank you all for coming today, and we look forward to a little bit of knowledge that you can impart to our crowd. And I'd like to focus on things that are as practical as possible for our people. And I know you all have a few different topics that you're going to talk on. I know Todd's going to be talking about acting and other things, especially for youth and acting on camera. Suzanne's going to be talking about marketing and distributing independent films and some of the difficulties. Glenn knows those as well from his producing work. And David's been on a lot of projects, and he's going to talk about, when he had to go through IFC to get Gigi Does It done. So we look forward to that. But first, I'd like to turn it over to Todd, and if you'd like to tell us a little bit about youth acting.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. Firstly, I'm very proud and privileged to be on this panel, and thank you for having me. Many years ago, I wanted to be an actor, and I was some Jewish kid in Potomac, Maryland, and I thought, why become another attorney? And so I packed my bags and I went to LA, and I found myself within a year working for Dick Clark Productions, and boy, that was a thrill. If you're going to get into the acting business and get into show business, do it because you have a need to do it. It has to be more than just a wanting. For me, it was a need. And it was the right decision. Taking the road less traveled, there's a lot of risks, but if it pays off, it's a good life. I'm happy I did that. I don't know your story and your beginnings, but for me, I took a left turn somewhere, and I said, come what may, I've got to do what I've got to do. And I never knew that many years later I'd be an actor. I never knew many years later I'd have a leading acting school. And lo and behold, one thing turns into something else. And so for whatever you're doing today, you never know where the steps may take you. Just do it to the best of your ability, do it with passion, and it will open up a door to something else. I've worked with thousands of kids. I work with all the agents and talent managers and casting directors, and I've helped and progressed many young careers. And I did it because to be honest with you, I love the kids more than I love the industry. And they're smart. So I'm very happy, very proud to move my studio into Ridgewood, right down the block at Heart in Motion with Nikki. And that's...
Yeah, I was a little curious as to just something I heard a long time ago, that acting on Broadway, I know you've done a lot of stuff for the stage. How is acting different on the stage versus on either the small screen or on the big screen?
It's a genre difference. Acting is acting is acting. It's all the same, but the given circumstance is different, right? When you're on stage, you're pulling in the back row, but when you're on camera, there is no audience. You have a complete disregard for the audience. And so it's a genre difference, but you need to learn the fundamentals first. And so I started with Shakespeare, and I was absolutely horrible, because I didn't understand acting. So start with contemporary acting, learn the fundamentals of acting, and build from there. TV and film is wonderful. I suggest stay non-union as long as you can. Get some credits behind you, get a nice reel, and then at some point in time, you'll become union, SAG-AFTRA.
David, how about you? I know you started on Broadway, 30 years ago? And now you're doing a lot of stuff, both small screen and a lot of stuff on the big screen as well. Have you noticed differences, or what advice could you give?
Well, Todd is right. Acting is acting. For me, and every actor is different, and every actor's experience is different. Yeah, that's the difference in genre and all that. I try not to think about that too much. The idea is to recreate or create what feels real, no matter what genre you're performing in. And certainly with stage, I guess the only difference would be you have to be a little loud, a little louder. You can do sort of subtle things on film, obviously, and in TV that don't necessarily translate on a stage. In a large theater, but for the most part, it's just volume. That's all. That's the only difference. It's. I would say for anyone interested in becoming an actor as a profession, there is a difference between being an actor and being a professional actor. Acting is fun. It's kindergarten. Sometimes it's challenging. Professional acting is the job, is the work of getting work, staying on top of people that you employ to get you work. As actors, unfortunately, we can't make the calls to the studios and say, hey, give me a shot at that part. Someone has to do that for us. And my best advice would be, if you are starting out, you do find representation. They like to make you feel like you work for them, but you're paying them. They work for you, and you don't have to hold that over them, obviously, but it is a partnership, and you are an equal partner in all of it. I can't tell you how many actor friends I've had that have gone by the wayside because they were afraid of their representation, afraid to say, hey, I think I should be up for this role. You got to fight for parts. Being a professional actor is an emotional roller coaster to begin with, and if you're not being aggressive, I can tell you that the only reason I've been lucky enough to be around for as long as I have is because I've been fairly aggressive in trying to get roles, and I won't take no for an answer. That's of course down the line, but starting out, the best thing you can do is get in a class, learn the craft, understand other actors, listen, and listen more than speak, and that's a good start, I guess.
You mentioned representation, David. Are you talking about an agent or a manager?
Agent and manager, yeah.
And what's the difference?
Well, a manager will handle things that an agent doesn't want to. For instance, travel to and from the set. But essentially, they're another set of eyes. So you essentially employ two agents who want to work together to find you a role, each of them with their own set of connections in order to do that. So it's like having two agents, except one of them handles your travel and your publicity, and the other one just gets you auditions. That's pretty much the difference, yeah.
And Todd, I imagine you're dealing with a lot of agents.
Oh yeah, all the time, every day. An agent's also regulated by the state. There's no union for managers, so they're regulated by the code of ethics. So people ask me all the time, should I get an agent or a manager? I say, well, back off there, Sally, because why don't you take who's interested in you, as long as they're pretty good? And they do work together. But agents now, the line's blurred now, but it's really, agents are like employment agencies, and they take a percentage when you work. Managers can charge 10, 15, 20, 25% because they're not regulated, but they do work together. So if you have an agent or a manager that does have interest in you, just make sure that they're credible, find someone that knows the business, and you should be fine.
And I imagine at your studio, your students are coming to you with those questions, like, do you know this agent, do you know this manager, should I go with this person or that?
Their parents are.
Good point. Glenn, I know you wanted to talk about pitching. And I understand that there might be two different times that you're doing pitching. Are you doing pitching to a studio or to get money first?
Well, yeah, I'm always pitching. One thing, if you don't mind, something that Todd was talking about, starting out in the business and having a need to be in the business. When you said that, I felt the same exact way when I was starting out. It's all I wanted to do. But in film school, they teach you how to be a director, how to be a film director. But directing a Hollywood movie is not really an entry-level position. So, you know, if you stay in the business long enough, find what you love, do what you love, be a part of the industry, you can see what happens. You can go in lots of different directions, and eventually maybe you'll get to direct a big Hollywood feature one day. Just wanted to say that. Yeah, in terms of pitching, I've had a lot of pitch meetings, and the thing I hear from networks or from an agent, I had an agent at UTA, and he said, make sure you go in there with an undeniable pitch so that they can't say no. And I've done that a couple times, and that show, The Men Who Built America, is a good example. It turns out they were looking for that kind of show. So the timing was a big deal. Since then, I've pitched a lot of shows where they say, great idea, but it's too expensive. Or great idea, but come back when you have an A-list actor. That kind of thing. So that term, undeniable pitch, really sticks with me when it comes to pitching. You can have a great idea, but that may not get you a sale.
And how do you go about, when you have this great idea, how do you go get that A-list actor, actress?
Well, I thought my agent would do that, but a lot of times, I'll bring a list of actors to an agent, let's say, and they'll say, great idea, go call them. And I say, I thought that's what you do. So I've taken it upon myself to do that. It's gotten easier because I can say, look me up, I'm not, I'm not a big star, but I do have some credentials. Are you willing to look at this project? And I've gotten a lot of good responses that way. I don't mean to put down agents. The agent I had was great, and he got me into any room I wanted to get into. But they didn't necessarily put together an undeniable pitch just because I had a great idea.
Okay. Now, how about, have you ever finished a project on your own and then had to go pitch it to a certain, streaming service or cable channel?
I have not done that since I did a film fresh out of college and got into festivals.
All right.
But
Suzanne, I know you have some experience.
Yeah, I want to ask how many people out there are filmmakers that want to make their own film on their own?
Let's see, 3 hands.
Okay.
4.
Good. Okay, because Glenn what he's doing is he's getting the studio or a studio production company to fund the movie, correct? So I'm going to speak to an independent filmmaker who you have an idea, you want control of it, you want to do it on your own. It's a different ball game. There's a lot of ways to get a film done, but if you want the control of your own, then you're grouped into the independent filmmaker realm, which is very difficult. My first movie was Equity. This was before the streamers were really big. First movie I was ever an above-the-line producer on. We got into Sundance, and then we had a bidding war, and Sony Pictures Classic took the movie and ran with it. Well, that's someone's dream. It hasn't happened since then, though I've had films that were done independently. We find a distributor, and then they place it places. The caveat is Amazon changed the ballgame a long time ago. They changed the ballgame again, because independent filmmakers have a few series. As soon as the series was completed, you can upload anything on your own. And as of last November, I believe, and it hasn't changed, you can't upload a movie or series anymore. You have to go through a distributor, which means after you make the movie, you have to find a distributor, a reputable distributor that's going to work with you. And you'll get it on Amazon, but like I have a movie right now, I have 2 movies right now. They extend the TVOD window, which is the transactional, where you have to pay. So rather than being on Amazon for all the world to see you, in the past, you could go through the distributor, they get a cut, and they stick you in the window where people have to pay. And frankly, how many people pay for a movie on Amazon Prime when you're paying for it anyway?
Yeah, I see that. Now, David, tell me a little bit about how you got Gigi Does It done for IFC.
Well, I had pitched. I'm also always pitching, trying to come up with stuff. It's not easy. I will say that. My first film that I wrote, a film called Attorneys at Raw, I wrote it 16 years ago. It's the first thing I've ever written, and I sold it to Universal Studios. I had an A-list actor attached, and it got greenlit. And then they hired the director, who did not have a friendly relationship with the producer. The director got fired. The project went nowhere. I got caught in the middle. I sold an idea to FX Network a few years ago, wrote the script. They didn't like it. That's the end of that. So to say, there's many, many steps. And in the case of the show the only show I've ever seen made, of all the pitches that I've pitched, we had an undeniable idea. And they are looking for a reason to say no. You know, they are not looking for a reason to say yes in those rooms. In fact, if you pitch to a place like Netflix, right, you walk into a waiting room full of heavyweights. I remember going in recently on a project, and Ron Howard was in the corner waiting to go in, and a few other big stars were littered in the room. We're all in the waiting room, and you think, my God, I'm just one idea. You know, I had a very sort of well-known actor friend, producer, director with me, and I thought, well, at least I got this guy, you know. Anyway, in the case of Gigi Does It, it was kind of undeniable. It was cheap, which they like. We had a really sort of low rent take on how to do it, and we had a proof of concept. And a proof of concept essentially is any piece of actual footage that you've recorded, that you've edited, that you think is you know, something you can show them. In my situation, I was writer, creator, and the actor on the show. I played a 76-year-old woman in 4.5 hours of prosthetic makeup. And the first step was finding the makeup company. So we didn't go to a studio, we didn't do anything. We just thought, let's see if we can get great makeup. And we did. We got a company called Alterian, who's, you know, they did like Bad Grandpa and a ton of other stuff. They created Chucky, if you will. That's their design. So they've been around forever, and they did the makeup, and we filmed a few pieces of just me talking as her. And that kind of sold it on its own. And then we had to then, of course, frame it in a narrative way and tell the story of what the series was going to be. It ended up being, we settled on a woman, she's 76, her husband passes away. She's lived on the cheap with her husband for nearly 50 years. He passes away, and she finds out that he's been hiding $6 million, which she's now inherited, and saving it for a rainy day. And she's had sort of a cheap, low-rent life her whole life, and she's going to spend this money in whatever way she can, but what we decided was that she was going to do it in the most petty ways. So each episode is her doing another petty thing with all this money. And we sold it to 3 networks. And the hardest decision was which network to go with. There was one network that was, it's the CW. They were very mainstream, and we knew we couldn't do it the way we wanted to do it, which was filthy. Filthy and a little bit, you know, edgy. So we passed on them, and they were going to offer us the most money per episode. In other words, they were going to give us a large budget to work with for each episode, and we passed. The other network was Fuse TV, and they offered us considerably less money and told us that we could get away with some of what we wanted to do. In retrospect, I should have gone with them. I ended up at IFC with the least money per budget, per episode, but they let me do whatever I wanted to do. So I had a lot of fun, but at the end of the day, the show wasn't marketed well, and no one watched it. It was on for 8 episodes on television, and now it's on Amazon Prime. So you got to pay to watch it, and that's rough. You know, it's rough to convince people to pay to watch your show, but it has taken on a cult sort of popularity. I'm very, very proud of it. I had a lot of fun doing it, and watching it become a fully realized idea. But it was a rough road, and if I could turn back time, I probably would, you know, sacrifice a bit of what I wanted to do for a better marketing situation and a little more money to make the episodes, because that became an issue. You know, we had ideas that we couldn't afford to do, and we had to cut corners everywhere, and you can see it in the show. And you know, listen, it's a lot like making an independent film. I've been the lead of a few independent films, tiny films. I just did one in Austin, Texas. I think the budget was $150,000. I was in 90 scenes of the movie. I'm the lead, and I got paid $3,000. You do it for the love of it, but you know, to get a movie made is not easy. There are 1,000 working parts, and then to get a movie seen ultimately means that, especially if it's your first movie, independent movie, you're not going to see a lot of money for it. It's a lot of work for not a lot of money, because the distributor takes money. Once you sell it away, it's gone from you. So really, it's a stepping stone to your next film, hopefully.
Yeah, I'd like to address something you said, David. You said about the marketing. So here you had IFC. I've had IFC as a distributor in one of my films. Marketing to me is huge, whether it's an independent film or you're working on a film and even someone like IFC has it and it's on a network. You can never stop, you never can say, no, I'm not going to do any marketing. I feel that you need to do marketing as soon as you make your film. You have to know your audience, have an idea of where you want it to land. And it starts in development, in production. I think if you're working on a set, these are just little things. You need to get interviews with the cast. You got to see what their socials are. You got to take a lot of stills. You got to have a plan in place. You got to choose cast depending on how well known they are and if they'll help you out with publicity. But it's a lot of publicity on an independent film. But even if you have something on IFC, you still need to market it yourself, because I've had films for Sony or IFC, we've still scrounged up some money to hire a PR firm that specializes in marketing films or specializes in marketing films and festivals. But you know, when you're watching Netflix and you see movies come up, that doesn't just come up by magic. There is money behind that and lots of things going on behind that, and the normal person cannot get their film in the top 10 of any of those. And that means that you yourself need to be doing a lot of the marketing.
Yeah, so in the case of Gigi Does It, there were no stills. Just so you know, IFC as a network went out of business a year after after my show. I didn't put them out of business. They were headed toward that direction. But in retrospect, you know, it was the first time I had ever written on a show, much less show run a show, which meant I was in charge. And they came to me with a marketing plan, which was essentially to create content specific for marketing, to film commercials for the show, which upon first read, I knew was not indicative of what the tone of the show was. And I said something. I said, hey, I think we should be writing these commercials. And they said, oh, no, we write the commercials. And in retrospect, I should have fought them on it, because ultimately what was presented to the public was a totally different version of what the show was. So you either were disinterested in that, or if you were interested, you would turn on the show and see a whole different kind of show than what the commercials that they wrote let you believe or had you believe. I did my best on social media at the time. But when the overwhelming majority of people who've heard about the show see it as a goofy, stupid show, which is how it was marketed, unfortunately, it's hard to erase that. People have preconceived notions. There's a lot of options on television, as we all know. And, you know, ultimately, you want them to choose you, and if you're showing them something that isn't appealing, then they won't give it a shot. I can't tell you how many people on social media reached out to me and said, I was surprised by this show. It was a lot funnier than they marketed it as. And, you know, was it a heartbreak? Sure, you know. like you were saying, Todd, and Glenn was saying, this is a calling. I have no choice but to be doing this. So for me, it's always the childlike wonder and the privilege of doing it that I kind of try to remind myself of, or that motivates me. And just to have had a show made. I have a poster of a show that I made in my office at home. I never won an award. No one, barely got paid. But I have a poster of an actual show that was actually on TV. I can tell you, I never thought that would happen. And it's been an award in itself, a reward in itself.
Last night, Mr. Saturday Night with Billy Crystal opened on Broadway last night. Spectacular. You can applaud. You can do it louder. And it was just magnificent. It was sold out, and Billy Crystal is Billy Crystal. He was absolutely amazing. And I know the budget, and I know what he's getting paid. You want to know? Not a lot. Not a lot, not that he needs the money, but he's not getting paid a lot. And you watch him on stage, and he's a kid out there. I mean, he's an absolute kid. I don't think we lose that. I think we just add more layers as we mature and get older. But there's always a piece of kid in you. Maybe a bigger piece in some of us. But he's on stage doing 6 shows a week. And I think on Broadway, maybe 7 is probably average. But he's doing 6. He's 74 years old. And he's doing it just because he loves it. Writers write. Producers produce. Actors act. You'll never lose if you follow your passion.
Glenn, I know you do a lot of different things, editing, producing. I think you're starting into directing as well, and obviously you do visual effects. How would you describe the different skill sets that are involved in all the different things that you do?
Well, I was fortunate early in my career, just out of film school, thinking I was going to be the next Martin Scorsese, And I wound up as a PA lugging lights around. And I had actually interned since high school on movie sets. And, I bounced around different departments. I worked with the camera department for a while. I was in props. I was in talent relations. And then I got into editing, which I always loved in school. I got into editing, and that led to a long career in editing, which led to visual effects. Visual effects company, which meant owning a business. So, which kind of led to producing. Just the opportunity, they came to me and said, hey, we want this show to look like Boardwalk Empire. Do you know how to do that? It was a documentary filmmaker who wanted Hollywood caliber recreations. So, and it came very naturally, I think, because I had experience in all these different departments, except hair and makeup, obviously. So putting out fires, it came a little bit easy for that reason, but only because I had the experience of being in all these different departments and owning a business, and again, seeing a lot of different filmmakers, in post-production and visual effects especially. You get to work on sometimes 4 or 5 movies a year. So I got to see a lot of different filmmakers, a lot of different producers, how they work, how they handle the money, how directors handle talent, and all that kind of thing. So, and now it's, somebody said to me, I'm developing a show with a comedian named Michael Jr. And we were talking, he said, wow, you've been in the business since you were a kid. He said, do you still love it? And without hesitation, I just came out. I said, yeah, I love it more than I ever have. And I just kind of came out, and I think it's because I stuck with it and got to a point now where, I sit next to the director on a movie set now, and we talk about the shots because there's visual effects in them, instead of lugging lights around, which I did for a lot of years, and a lot of my friends kind of dropped out of the business. And I'm very fortunate and very, very grateful that I stuck with it.
Right. And for those who don't know, the other night Glenn put on a seminar on Zoom for us on visual effects 101, an introduction. It was really good. It was very well received, and we're going to have that up on our YouTube channel soon. Suzanne, I had a question for you. When we were doing our networking in person here last night, I think you mentioned that you can get a popular actor, actress for a movie, and I understand that now you want to pick that actress because they have a big social media platform. But if they don't post anything, it's worthless.
Well, yes. I worked on a movie. We had 2 major Hollywood stars on it, and we didn't get any interviews with them during production, and we didn't have any good BTS photos, and one of them went on one talk show, and the other one gave us 1 tweet. So, and they were expensive actresses. So yes, it's very important to pick your cast, but I also want to talk to something, because it's a room with filmmakers in it, how following your passion, what everyone here is doing, and you know, the entertainment business is a lot of fun. And I remember the first time I was working with an actress, she said, "I'm playing," and I didn't get it. But you know, actors like to play, producers like to produce, editors like to edit. But you can do lots of different things. But I just want to, you know, we're talking about how hard it is to pitch to a network, and I was talking about how difficult it is to find a distributor. And frankly, you can make your money back on some films. I just had a film that we had pitched to Lifetime. They passed on it. It was a completed film. We redid the pitch, specifically targeted to Lifetime, and now they licensed it, so we made our money back on the film. And it was an under $500,000 film. So for the independent filmmakers out there, give it a shot. I mean, you can start through crowdfunding. You can, you know, I'm a big believer in crowdfunding for many different ways. You can put a cast, ask people you know who know people. You know, I don't want to be, oh, you can't make money, it's so hard, and yeah, you're up against the Ron Howards and the Shonda Rhimes and the Obamas up at Netflix, but the independent film industry is still up and running, and you can make a film, you know, you can make a decent film, I would say, for $150,000, $200,000. The COVID protocols may have increased that a bit, but don't lose your passion, because you'll always find a home for your film.
Thank you. And we're going to open this up to questions in just a few minutes, but I think one of you was saying that at certain times the industry likes certain types of films, and what might have gotten red lighted, or green lighted rather, 5 years ago is now a no-go today. What are your experiences as to what, you know, these companies are looking for?
Well, I heard horror's always in. I get a lot of pitches for horror, but I don't watch horror. I close my eyes most of the time. I love rom-coms. Rom-coms are in this Rebel Media that I'm a part of that. We're doing rom-coms.
Yeah, what ends up happening sometimes is you do walk in with an undeniable idea and they go, wow, this is a great idea. We're not making this type of show. It's not right for our brand. So really, you want to fashion an idea towards who you're selling it to. You don't want to walk into an office of a company that you know doesn't make those kinds of shows, or isn't interested, or maybe just made that kind of show and it's successful and they don't want to, you know, do a blueprint, they don't want to double up. You got to be smart about who you're pitching to and what you're pitching to those people. I think the one thing I thought about, you know, this is a personality game, okay? Working in this business, following your passion. Passion is wonderful, and certainly you need it all the way through, and it enables you to fight for what you want, which you're gonna have to do. But I'll tell you who doesn't make it in Hollywood, from what I've seen. Narcissists and people who are so nervous, so doubtful of themselves. So who does make it? I'll tell you exactly who. Narcissists with an inferiority complex. That combination, that dichotomy, In other words, go into what you're doing with the fullest confidence, but check yourself. You know, you might not be as talented or as good as you think you are. And that's okay, because there's always room for improvement. It takes time. I can tell you for a fact, for anyone starting in this business, unless you get extremely lucky, or your uncle is, you know, a producer, you're going to have to put in years of networking, years of building connections to get to where you want to be. Yes, you can make a small film for a very little amount of money. I know an amazing group of intrepid filmmakers that find the money no matter what. The problem is their films then have to be great for them to make another one. They have to really score in the marketplace. If they don't, the next investor is more hard-pressed to give them money. It's a business. It's how it works. Just like in any business. Just like with any invention, right? So what I would say is it takes years for this. It takes time and effort. I've met so many East Coast filmmakers and East Coast actors that go, F LA, I'm never going to LA. Hollywood is fake. I'm better, I'm the real deal. You're going to end up in LA for a while. You got to play the game. I worked with a filmmaker who made a good few films. His first film premiered at Sundance. His very first film was a big hit. And he had this attitude of, LA is fake, Hollywood is phony, they make crap, I make great stuff. He hasn't made a film in the last 10 years. Now, he made 5 films, 6 films. But what happened was he had this attitude, and the second his film wasn't great, the second one of his films didn't hit, he was gone, because he didn't work the room, he didn't work and network and make connections. And so, you know, it's a game, and you got to play it smart. And the best thing you can do is go in with full confidence and a little self-doubt.
Many years ago, for just a few short weeks, I was dating a young lady on the Upper West Side, and she broke up with me because she started dating somebody new. He was a writer, and I said, how can you leave me for a writer? Like, he has no money. I have, well, no money either, but, well, his name was Glenn Gordon Caring. And you know him. He was, his last job before he left it was Bull, the showrunner. He discovered Bruce Willis, moonlighting, and all that stuff. I get it now why she left me. But what I wanted to say was, I wrote a show, and I called Glenn up, and I said, Glenn, can you help me get behind the show? And he said, Todd, it's not my genre, so this is probably not for me, and you're not getting a lot of interest right now, but here's what I advise you to do. It may not be time for it. I know you've worked real hard to try and get this thing made and out there. He said, just put it on the shelf. You'll pick it up later on in time. So my question to my esteemed panel is, have you had something that you've written or done, and you put it on the shelf, and several years later you took it off, revised it, and it got made?
I can tell you that I recently had an experience. I wrote a script of a full-length feature, and these big producers attached to it. They loved it. They loved it. And I worked on it with them for a total of 7 years, rewriting it, making it perfect for the marketplace. And they were happy with it. And then they said, we need to attach a director. A reputable director will get this project sold. And we went through a long list of directors, friends of mine, friends of theirs. 25 directors said no, most of whom didn't even read it. That's the truth. I said, hey, what if I direct it? And the producer said, we think you should direct it. But if you direct it, we really don't want anything to do with it because it's not our brand. Did I give up? Yes. Do I have it? Have I sent it to people who've never read it? Yes. I haven't given up on it. It's my passion. I'll never give up on it. The worst they can say is no. I've sent it to huge producers who've written back, hey, I can't wait to read this, and they haven't read it. No one's read it. The people I've sent it to haven't read it. What are you going to do when they don't even read it? And so it hurts. But no, I'm never giving up on that story, ever. I poured my heart and soul into that thing for 7 years. People do love it, the ones that read it. And I'll find somebody. And if I have to make it for super cheap and make it with actors that I can afford rather than actors that can really bring something amazing to it, so be it. I want my story told.
Suzanne?
Sure. In answer to Todd's question, I don't have anything on the shelf. I kind of have something on the shelf now, but that speaks to timing. What I have on the shelf now was a movie that we released during the pandemic in theaters. That did not go well. Then I was working on another movie called A Call to Spy, and that was by IFC, and that was going into pretty much every theater in Europe. And then the pandemic hit, so all the theaters got shut down. They put it on video on demand. And it's an excellent movie. You probably never heard of it. It's like The Hidden Figures, but it's female spies. And it was timing. It was the pandemic. I would have hoped that IFC would re-release it in theaters now because no one's ever heard of it, but I don't think they're going to do that. But on the flip side, because of the streamers now, you'll see, top 10 movies on Netflix, and it'll be something like from the 80s, and young people are still discovering it. So movies have a lot longer lifespan right now.
I'm just going to say there was a project that was shelved about 6 years ago, a passion project that I'll never give up on. And the network I pitched it to, I pitched it all over. It almost sold with HBO and Netflix and Showtime and CNN. And recently they called me up and said, hey, it was the show I referenced that I said, the network said, great idea, but it's too expensive. They came back and said, hey, is that show still expensive? I said, maybe. And we started talking about it. It's a period thing with a theater, a stadium full of 100,000 people. It's the kind of thing, it's big or it can't be done. And so I said, yeah, it's expensive. Do you still want to do it? And they said no again. But I'll never give up on it, and I still pitch it. And it's one of those shows that it got all the way to almost being sold, and we met with the top executives from all the networks. And I do plan on making it, but it can't be cheap. It's got to be done right. But from those pitches, that got me a development deal with CNN. So you could pitch something and that could fail, but that could lead to other things. Networking, you mentioned. They liked the pitch so much, they said, well, can you give me 5 more pitches and we'll give you X amount of dollars in the next year. So, just because a pitch doesn't work, it could lead to other things, meeting people, building relationships.
That's a wonderful story.
I think we're going to turn it over to questions soon.
One more
David?
thing. I love being on the creative side rather than the development corporate side. And here's why. If we all have ideas, we'll have them our whole lives. Best case scenario, they get made. We're still working. The development executives you pitch to, they don't have much time in the business. They have people breathing down their neck for quality. The second they mess up, they're out. I can't tell you how many heads of networks I worked for that then became independent producers on small projects, and they were totally repugnant people when they were heads of networks, and then suddenly they were humbled by having to go to the creative side. So I know this sounds petty, but I always tell myself that. I think, well, they may hate my idea, but I'll be doing this a lot longer because I have ideas, At least I'm an idea man in the business, and once again, I think we all owe it to the privilege of our own success thus far to keep going. You know, you don't want to stop. It's never enough, right? It's never enough. You know, yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Now, we have a few minutes left, and we'd like to see if there's any questions from the audience. Yes, go ahead.
So how much value do you put on a pitch deck compared to your pitch? Do you really are you putting everything into that, or are you more working the verbal pitch? Like, what's your views on that?
The verbal pitch is really important. The pitch deck is super important as well. I mean, I wouldn't say that either one is more important than the other. I mean, it's a show. You got to go in and present something that knocks them off their feet. And if a pitch deck does that, and then you don't verbally, you aren't verbally able to explain it, then that hurts your pitch deck and vice versa.
I'm going to add something about pitch decks. I get a lot of pitch decks, and you have to realize who you're pitching to. If you're looking for investors or producers or even directors, you got to make a pitch deck that's easy to read. That's my pet peeve. And also, it's got to show your vision. I don't want to see all these actors that you think you can get. I don't want to see, well, this was a horror movie and this made $10 million, so mine is going to make $10 million also. I just want to see what your vision is. But you can hire people to put your pitch decks together, and it's a wise thing to do.
Good. Another question right here up front.
I was wondering about the benefits if you get accepted into a film fest in helping to launch the film. If there's some experience with that, like South by Southwest was the Neil Young film, I think, whether or not that helped launch it or if it sort of didn't grow, I don't know, back in the time.
I'm surprised you remember that. I was just the editor on that particular film. I was given a producer credit, but I didn't really produce the film. That was because I didn't get paid. Passion project. Me and Jonathan were the only two people who didn't get paid on that show, and I didn't care. I'm working with Neil Young and Jonathan Demme. I'm in heaven. Yeah. That's when my wife wants to be my agent. She goes, you know, you got to get paid for these things. I just like doing it, you know. But that movie was never released because Neil wanted. He's still waiting for some special audio technology to come out in theaters, which may never happen. But he thinks it deserves that audio quality. So I think they had him there because he's Neil, and Jonathan Demme showed up, but it didn't lead to any deal.
Any other questions out there? Over there? Yes, sir?
Yeah, this question is probably directed at Glenn. When you hire an editor, what do you look for in an editor? What aesthetics do you look for? Because, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there now on social media. Everything's quick pace, cut fast, really, which I think a lot of people can do. Do you put more concentration on the way somebody juxtaposes shots together? Do you tells the story, or what do you look for in an editor?
Can they tell a story? I see a lot of, yeah, that's the main thing. The easiest editing to do is an action sequence. The hardest thing to do is a conversation between two people. Can they tell a story? That's what I look for. I don't look for match cuts and things like that. That's something I was taught in Ron Howard's cutting room too. It's, can you tell a story? Can you elicit emotion? Can you get across the director's vision? It's hard to judge an editor because you don't know what they had to work with initially. So it's a tough thing. It's hard. You can't just judge them on their previous work because you don't know what the dailies were. But you can talk to them and see if do they understand the story, do they understand the vision of the director.
That's great. Any other questions?
Jim?
Yes, all the way in the back.
Hi. For filmmakers who are starting out and building their contracts, multiple times it was mentioned about having meetings with big name networks and streaming companies. How do you get to having those meetings? There's a lot of information about pitches and getting presenting yourself well, and there's
How do you get the meetings booked?
I was just going to say that is the hardest part. I mean, there's plenty of, if you use your contacts, I've used an agent, and I have an agency I work with in LA, and they will shop it around. There's a lot of different ways to do it. There's all these places that, you know, in New York or LA, there's all these organizations. You can pay for a class, you can watch it online and try to connect with them. But that is the hardest part.
In broad strokes, patience and fortitude. It's not going to happen overnight, and you can't give up on it. And you get it done any way you can. Certainly being in Los Angeles and physically in there, making friends. Friends make other friends. You meet other people through your friends. You never know when that person becomes successful, and you give that person a ring. But that takes time, you know. It is a gray area. I don't think there is a formula, a specific formula. You know, there is luck involved. Or you get damn good at networking. I was terrible. I was terrible. I hated it. I never got over hating it. And luckily, I'm still doing this. But it's been 30 years, you know, and I only feel lately that I'm getting to do things I've always wanted to do. I had to sacrifice a lot of my own creative inclinations so I could make a living. Because work begets work. And you do the dumbest thing you've ever done that you're ashamed of and you hope no one ever sees. With gratitude, with pleasure, you do it. And that leads to something astounding. But you gotta believe, you gotta have faith. I know these are broad strokes, but as I've gotten older, they're what I depend on the most. Patience, fortitude, faith.
Sounds like Suzanne, you want the final word?
Yeah, I will take the final word. One other just specific, sometimes if you have UTA or CAA actors in your films, of course they're a good stepping stone to use. But Sean asked about film festivals and the benefit of film festivals. You know, you should always have a film festival strategy. If you think you have a film that will make it to Sundance or Tribeca or someplace where the buyers are, then, you know, only wait for that, go through the different cycles. But the film festivals are also a place to connect, to get your name out there. You know, and not all of them have buyers. The big ones have buyers. That's what you want, or you want the BAFTA qualifying film festivals. But it's network. And even a festival like Ridgewood Guild International Film Festival is a great place to make connections.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much to all our panelists, David Krumholtz, Glenn Allen, Suzanne Orders-Curry, and Todd Edelson. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.